As people pick up the pieces after Hurricane Helene, another hurricane threatens to rip the nation apart. The hurricane of partisan politics. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Hurricane Helene, the deadliest hurricane to hit the U.S. since Katrina, has left a wake of destruction in its path.
Tonight, the staggering human toll from Hurricane Helene. More than 200 killed, countless communities crippled.
Search crews are combing through the remote mountains in western North Carolina, hoping to locate those still missing and those in need of supplies.
Looks so bad. It looks like a prequel to Waterworld. And no one should ever have to be reminded of Waterworld. Ever. Of course, it's an election year. It's next month. Cower in fear. So even natural disasters have become political. To kick things off, let's talk about the response to the disaster, because Democrats are in the White House, and naturally, the strongest criticisms are from the right. Speaker Johnson claimed the response has been an abject failure. And as always, the loudest criticisms come from Donald Trump, who is now calling Harris's hurricane response worse than Bush's. Listening to the critics alone, you get the impression that the Biden and Harris administration did absolutely nothing. They slammed Biden for staying in Delaware and Harris for campaigning before visiting the affected areas in person. Trump is claiming that the federal government and Democrats are going out of their way to not help people in Republican areas, leaving Americans to drown and ignoring calls from Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. It sounds downright evil, like they're hoping if enough Republicans die, they can flip the state. In reality, a lot of these claims Trump and others make fall pretty flat. For example, Kemp himself has said that he spoke with President Biden, and there's no verified evidence suggesting that the federal government is blocking efforts to help Hurricane Helene victims based on political preference. Another popular claim is that the federal government only responded a week after the disaster. But Biden declared an emergency, ordering federal assistance beginning on September 26th, the same day Helene was categorized as a Category 4 hurricane, which is fast reaction time from a guy who's so old he can't even blink quickly anymore. On top of that, he deployed active duty soldiers for support, and the National Guard from over a dozen states came into action, as did FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So no, the government wasn't selectively helping people or just twiddling its thumbs doing nothing. They were sending soldiers to make sure all these Republicans got what was coming to them. Democrats are using the military against its own citizens. The Illuminati is real. However, those on the left have, shall we say, a completely opposing view to those on the right when it comes to the response. When it comes to Harris, left-leaning media love to portray her in a more positive, dare I say, joyful light. In fact, you sort of get the impression that the U.S. government, under her and Biden's watch, is doing a good job and all is right with the world. Thanks, Mamala. So while there are some truly wild claims out there about the government's response, or lack thereof, to the hurricane, they are not simply limited to the government's response. As a matter of fact, out of all the claims that have garnered attention and controversy, there's a particular one that has gained quite a bit of traction. The one that says Hurricane Helene victims are losing out on emergency relief because of illegal immigrants. So how exactly did this idea come about? Well, just 3 months ago, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said that FEMA was tremendously prepared for the hurricane season.
FEMA is tremendously prepared. This is what we do. This is what they do. And the key here, Rebecca, is also to make sure that the communities who are potentially impacted are prepared as well.
Which feels like saying, it doesn't look like rain, I don't need an umbrella. Why are you tempting fate, man? So it was a surprise when Mayorkas warned 3 months later, we are expecting another hurricane hitting. We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season. With all that in mind, it's no wonder that many remembered an interesting fact. FEMA has provided well over $1 billion in funds for migrants. So FEMA claimed to have money, suddenly doesn't, and is also spending money on migrants. The obvious conclusion? The Biden-Harris administration used FEMA disaster funding for illegal immigrants, thus prioritizing illegal migrants over American citizens. Not a great look. In response to questions about FEMA spending on migrants, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre didn't make things any better.
The Biden administration of using FEMA funding to support undocumented migrants. How is the White House responding to that?
I mean, it's just categorically false. It is not true. It is a false statement.
And everyone was satisfied. Because as we all know, Politicians and their mouthpieces would never mislead the public. Many responded by saying Jean-Pierre is simply lying through her teeth. So what gives? Who's right? Well, as always, things are a bit more complicated than what either side makes it out to be, because politicians running on accuracy and nuance, that's a lot of extra steps to wind up on unemployment. So it looks like, once again, it's time for another segment of, wait, is that true? First, it helps to think about Karine Jean-Pierre's frame of mind. She referred to this Washington Post article, which was a rebuttal to Trump's claims that Biden redirected disaster funds to migrants. But it's important to not forget what the article focused on: disaster relief. It's a 100% completely separate category from funds going to migrants through FEMA's Shelter and Services Program, which helps local groups offer humanitarian aid to migrants after they're released from DHS custody. As far as we know, FEMA has not been using disaster funds to help illegal immigrants. Even Speaker Johnson had to admit as much. So no, the Biden-Harris administration didn't use disaster funds specifically for immigrants. Glad to clear that up. But that doesn't actually leave Jean-Pierre off scot-free. In that Q&A session shared earlier, Jean-Pierre was asked if FEMA funding, not disaster funding specifically, was used to help migrants. She said no, but that's not true. FEMA has been helping migrants as shown before. And even if support for migrants doesn't come directly from disaster funds, that wouldn't make much of a difference for critics on the right. They're going to be upset no matter what, because resources that could have otherwise been used to address FEMA's funding went to illegal immigrants instead, especially when these American citizens are in such dire straits. So if you're on the right, you're probably thinking Karine Jean-Pierre is outright lying. If you're on the left, you probably think she was simply referring to something else. Reality is super fun. And while the right has made some questionable claims about the hurricane, the left is now sounding the alarm with their tried and true tactics. Concerns about conspiracy theories and misinformation. Now, to be fair, there's no shortage of wild conspiracy theories and misinformation circulating, as we've seen. Unsurprisingly, many left-leaning outlets are using this as the perfect opportunity to complain about far-right extremists and Trump. Always Trump. This is all to say, it seems like the left and the right live in completely different worlds thanks to hyper-politicization and government ineptitude when it comes to tackling issues like the border crisis and the response to Hurricane Helene. This in turn is encouraging trust in institutions like FEMA to sink to even lower levels. With the amount of politicization we're seeing happen over the hurricane response, I dread to see what life will be like a month from now during the elections. But thank you for watching America Uncovered. And before YouTube's algorithm sends you off to some random video, click here to see a video I made on my new gaming channel about the just released Silent Hill 2 remake. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.